Hello, this is the Death Row and Executions channel. My name is Paco. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more Death Row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. Also, check out my other channel here on YouTube called The Maximum Sentence, where I cover recent crimes and convictions. There will be a link for that as well. Glen Edward Rogers was born in 1962, so he's 62 years old. Glen Rogers was a serial killer, mostly during the 1990s. He was ultimately tried and sentenced to death in both California and in Florida, but he committed murders in several other states as well. Rogers has been referred to in the media as the cross-country killer, but more often as the Casanova killer. For anyone out there who is young and hasn't heard of Casanova, Casanova was known as the Great Lover, a man born in Venice, Italy in the year 1725, and it is said that during his travels throughout Europe during his lifetime, he had seduced hundreds of women, including nuns and married women, and he had served time in prison for that after being charged with immorality. Glen Rogers was sentenced to death for 2 murders, but after he was captured, he claimed that he had killed about 70 people throughout the United States, including confessing that he was the one who killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman in California in 1994. That it was him and not O.J. Simpson who killed them while he was in California. According to Rogers, he tried dating Nicole, or he was infatuated with her, but she rejected him, so he went to her house and killed her. Another day, he changed his story and said that O.J. Simpson had hired him to break into the house to retrieve some jewelry that he wanted back, and that he was forced to kill Nicole when she showed up. And he did the same with Ron Goldman. But investigators did not believe those stories from Rogers, since they had closed the case after charging O.J. Simpson. Aside from all the other possible murders in multiple states, between September and November of the year 1995, Glen Rogers killed 4 women in 4 different states during a 6-week period. Glen Rogers, it was reported, had been very good at luring women with his charm, good looks, and by flashing a lot of money, often paying for all the drinks for a woman in a bar that he was interested in, and paying for all of the woman's friends' drinks as well. But Rogers was also very elusive, always staying one step ahead of the manhunt for him by authorities in various states. Yet, one investigator had stated that even though Rogers was very elusive, it didn't seem that he was trying to hide. He always gave his real name to everyone that he met, or when registering at motels, when renting a room. He also drove his victims' cars around for weeks after murdering the owner of the car, and he never tried to change his appearance. In September of the year 1995, Glen Rogers met a woman at a bar in the Van Nuys area of Los Angeles in California. Her name was Sandra Gallagher. Sandra was married and she had 3 children, but she was having problems with her husband and they were basically estranged. After paying for Sandra's drinks at the bar and all of her friends' drinks, Rogers told Sandra that he needed a ride home, and they left in her blue pickup truck. Early the following morning, that blue pickup truck was parked in the parking lot of a hospital, which happened to be near the apartment where Glen Rogers lived. An employee of the hospital, a witness, said that she was arriving to work when she saw a man with long blonde hair and a beard setting the pickup truck on fire and running away. After the fire was put out, they found Sandra's badly burned body in the vehicle. The medical examiner determined that she was not killed by the fire. She was already dead, killed by manual strangulation. Investigators learned that Sandra had been at a bar the night before. They went there and questioned the employees, who told the investigators that Sandra left with a man who had been a regular there the past few days and that his name is Glen Rogers. Van Nuys police searched Rogers' apartment and found items belonging to Sandra. The hunt was on for Glen Rogers, and his name was entered into a national database that he was wanted for murder. By the following month, Glen Rogers was working at the Mississippi State Fair in Jackson, Mississippi. There he met, at the fair, a woman named Linda Price. Linda was a 34-year-old single mother of 2 children. Roger and Linda began seeing each other, and because Glen Rogers had nowhere to live, she allowed him to move into her apartment in Jackson, Mississippi. This is a photo of Linda and Rogers that they had taken together. However, after a short time together, Linda realized that Rogers had a really bad temper, especially after he's been drinking. And she told members of her family that she was going to tell him he must leave her home. On October 31st, Halloween Day, 1995, members of the family went to her home, as they had planned to gather for Halloween festivities. Linda was found dead in her bathtub after having been stabbed to death. When investigators questioned the family, they said that Linda was living with a man named Glen Rogers. All of Linda Price's family knew his name, and that Linda was about to kick him out. When investigators entered his name into their database, they saw that he was wanted for murder in Van Nuys, California. 5 days later, in Tampa, Florida, Glen Rogers entered a bar where he met a woman named Tina Marie Cribbs. They had drinks, and he later asked Tina Marie to drop him off at the motel where he was staying. Tina Marie was driving a white Ford Festiva. The following morning, Glen Rogers went to the motel's office and paid for another night at the motel. The motel manager later told investigators that soon after paying for another night, she saw him loading luggage from the room into a white Ford Festiva, and that he later drove off. This all seemed very unusual to the motel manager, since he had just paid for another night. Rogers had also told the manager that he didn't want anyone going inside his room, that he didn't want anybody cleaning his room. On the following day, after checkout time, there was still a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the door, but the guest was supposed to have checked out, according to the management, and the maid had permission to go inside to clean. Once inside, the maid found Tina Marie Cribbs dead in the bathtub, having been stabbed to death. When investigators questioned hotel staff, they learned that the room was rented to Glen Rogers. By the way, investigators theorized that the reason why Rogers' murder victims keep turning up in a bathtub is because he likely ran water over the body in an attempt to wash away evidence. By this time, the FBI had become involved in a multi-state manhunt for a serial killer, and Glen Rogers would be added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. News was now spreading fast throughout the country. Meanwhile, Glen Rogers had made his way from Tampa, Florida, to Bossier City, Louisiana. Once there, he got together with a woman named Andy Giles Sutton. Now, one report seems to indicate that Andy and Rogers were previously acquainted with each other, as Andy had told friends that she was so happy to see him again. This particular photo I found of Andy, as it appears on the Find a Grave site, almost looks like it was created by AI. I'm not sure. Anyway, just days after Rogers' last murder of Tina Marie Cribbs in Florida, Andy's roommate in Bossier City, Louisiana, had said that she arrived home late one night and could hear Andy and her boyfriend in the bedroom that she shared with Andy. So instead of going to her bed in the bedroom, she slept on the couch that night. The following morning, soon after she woke up from the couch, she knocked on the bedroom door and then opened it when nobody responded. And the roommate discovered Andy's slashed and bloody body on the bed. When investigators questioned the roommate about who was with Andy during the night, she said it must have been the guy that she just began dating, a man named Glen Rogers. Authorities and the FBI were still keeping watch for Glen Rogers throughout the United States, but they focused a lot on regions in Kentucky because even though Rogers had been born and grew up in Ohio, he had family and friends in Kentucky, and they thought he might make contact with one of his relatives there. And they were right. About 4 days after the murder of Andy Giles Sutton, a family member of Glen Rogers called 911 to report that Rogers had just left her home after he stopped by for a visit. She also gave the dispatcher his direction of travel and said that he was driving a small white car, which authorities know is the car that he stole from Tina Marie in Florida. A Kentucky State police trooper spotted the car. There was a high-speed chase, and Glen Rogers eventually crashed into a ditch, and he was arrested. News media in Kentucky got wind of the chase for the notorious serial killer, and they were actually on scene to record the events live in real time as the chase and capture was unfolding. Later, during a search of the car by crime scene technicians, they found inside the car and in his luggage bloody clothing and a lot more evidence linking him to all 4 murders of the previous 6 weeks. It appears that all the states had agreed to let Glen Rogers be tried for murder in Florida first. That trial took place about 2 years after the crimes, and Rogers was found guilty of the murder of Tina Marie Cribbs and sentenced to death. And it is in Florida where he currently sits on death row, awaiting an execution scheduled to take place on May 15 of this year. 2 years after his conviction and sentencing in Florida, he was transferred to California to stand trial there for the murder of Sandra Gallagher. In California, he was also found guilty and sentenced to death. Rogers was then sent back to death row in Florida. The other states have opted out of taking Rogers to trial for the murders that he committed in their states, since he already has 2 death sentences issued to him. At least one report that I saw stated that Glen Rogers left 11 children without their mothers. Please remember to hit the subscribe button for more death row and upcoming execution stories so that you're alerted when the next one comes out. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. My name is Paco Rivera. Take care and bye for now.